We don't need to, we're
You
just
sure?
going to talk about what's going on at the Capitol. Yeah.
Go
Should I
ahead, Jack.
Great. So in the CEO report, we just wanted to talk about two things with you. First, make sure since we're all together, we talk about the funding strategy, what's happened at the Capitol and the governor's office. And then in the second part of this, like we did at your last meeting, Lisa Blatnick's going to come up and talk a little bit more about where we are with the inventories on our business direct system, so you kind of get your next monthly update on that. But the big news, of course, is just a little over a month now. It was the governor's announcement of the intention to move forward on CalSTRS funding. And I've provided you and for the public behind me a one-page funding consideration document so that you can kind of see how Ed and I and the others that are helping us on this are articulating the financial needs of the system. With the governor's announcement and now the speaker's announcement last week, there's considerable increase in media activity and just people that want to know what the story is. I think well before people started to chime in on the $80 billion, $70 billion number, Ed and I realized that was going to be a point of confusion. That's what you can see. We included text in your CEO report when we wrote this several weeks ago. And sure enough, in some of the very first media reports after the speaker's press conference, that was one of the initial things that some of the reporters described as a discrepancy. So we've been trying to work hard to get messages back out to those media outlets. And as you can see in this funding consideration document, that's the first thing we've explained. But I think the LAO document from yesterday particularly did it in such detail, and their materials are well read by those that are at the Capitol. So I think this shouldn't continue to be an issue, I would hope, going forward, that people recognize that both numbers are accurate. We're the source of both numbers. So there shouldn't be any perspective that anyone's trying to create an agenda with a certain type of number. So with what's happened, the legislature, the assembly, has indicated they will now begin a series of hearings. The first one is been defined for February 19th, and we were invited basically to come in and provide a presentation of around a half hour, 40 minutes, really speaking around what's on this document, again, making sure that everyone has the right facts around the system, what the cost of waiting is, the work that you've done in all these different scenarios. But given that the governor spoke quite strongly to the need for a full funding plan in 30 years, and the speaker announced a similar commitment to full funding, and that's been your definition in the SCR 105 report, I think there's a nice convergence of all those that are speaking to the issue, that there's an expectation of starting with that strong standard in the discussion for the funding. So it's a good starting point. I think we're all pleased to see that there aren't differences of perspectives on that. And then it's our expectation they'll define agendas for subsequent hearings. One issue that will clearly become important at some point in the conversation, since, again, the governor recognized that one of his principles was there'd be shared responsibility for funding this obligation, will be, I'm sure, a lengthy discussion on what can be done with members' contributions. We've been the primary source of that conversation in terms of the legal framework for what can and can't be done with member contributions. So it'd be my expectation that Brian, and to the extent he needs any other legal support, we'll have to provide that expertise to the Assembly again. And again, we haven't heard other perspectives on that. So at least up till now, it's been a widely held, discussed belief that there are limitations that can be done on member contributions, and we've provided an alternative where they can be raised, but under some constraints. So we'll have to see particularly how that's an important part of the conversation in shaping the final solution. So I would expect after the first hearing that piece will start to come to play in the public discussion for us. Already mentioned in some of the media pieces is, of course, the relevance of Prop 98 to the ultimate solution. We were not expecting that to be part of our presentations or our expertise. So I think really other parties are going to need to weigh in on that and discuss the legal technicalities of the application of that, because it's highly relevant to shaping the final solution and will clearly greatly influence the stakeholders in their proposals. Ed, is there anything else you can think of from your side, and any reactions you're getting over at the Capitol or anything you want to
No,
share?
I mean, I think it's, we started having some conversations with legislators on both Senate and Assembly, and Democrats and Republicans, and I think we continue to get very positive feedback from legislators that they feel it has to be done. They're, I think, happy that there is starting to be some movement on that, and they want to be helpful in trying to arrive at a conclusion. So it's a good conversation so far.
Besides the $71 billion versus the $80 billion kind of discrepancy, can you point to other issues of ways that we've communicated, and then clearly there's been confusion, or in the media, are there other places where there've been that kind of feedback to us about, are you clear about this, or conflicts of communication, or I guess I'm just, I hear from people.
We've had these so many times. I'm trying to think where there's points. That's right. Yeah, when we released that number to you early, the 168 is $1 billion GASB number, that created some confusion initially with some of the editorial boards, confusing that with suddenly now, oh my gosh, it's a very different number. But we followed up and to make sure they understand the distinction between the GASB calculation and this. I haven't seen that circle back recently. It may come back, though, since we're going to keep talking about GASB with the school districts in the future. So it's something, I guess, a caution point we should watch out for, to see people aren't being confused by that. I think, I don't want to say I'm comfortable, but we've been discussing these numbers so much that I actually do feel that the record's pretty good. I'm not saying it's perfect, but the record's pretty good, so that people can roll up their sleeves and talk about now how to solve that piece of it. So other than the one we just mentioned, which isn't much of a blip, I think we're in pretty good shape. There could be legal issues that start to pop up, though, depending on what ideas are put forth.
I think this is a very helpful document to have, because I know when Marianne and I were going around and talking to legislators last spring, I mean, a lot of folks don't know community colleges are part of, it's K through 14.
That's correct.
A lot of
That's right.
legislators don't know we don't pay into Social Security as teachers in California. And so I think it's helpful that some of this information is clarified. And I think even as we continue to communicate, I know that's a source of pride at CalSTRS to make sure we're accurate. But I have been shocked just, that the knowledge base, I'm still learning myself about CalSTRS, but just, that some of the basic things about our benefit or who gets a CalSTRS benefit, that there's still some inconsistencies in terms of legislators' knowledge, or the staff that are working for those legislators, their knowledge as well. So I think documents like this are helpful to kind of say this is to get this out to folks, and I know we'll have have this in the hands of every legislator at the Capitol, right? So.
Yeah, and by coincidence, I have some speeches to some large groups of our members scheduled over the next 2 months. So it's a nice chance for us to start to also do face-to-face communication with the members, and I'll be anxious to get their feedback to see how they think this impacts them and how they react to that.
Super. Anything else?
I don't think on that. Anything else for you? Okay. So let's kind of totally switch our focus over to the operations issues later in the report. And again, this is now the third report we're providing for you. And Robin and Lisa, we're going to help articulate some of the progress we've made. Again, big picture wise, we recognize we had some strong inventory challenges in both the procurement side and our accounts payable side, and we're trying to create a trajectory to be in a settled position by June so that we can go on about other issues for next year. So, Lisa, were you starting?
Yes, I'm going to start.
And
Thank you very much.
Are you looking at a certain page or anything? Or
No, actually, I'm not looking at any certain page. So I do have that documentation, though, that you have in your packet if you want to ask any questions about that. So the first thing that I'd like to do is just to provide you a status of where we think we are as far as stabilization by June 30th. And the good news is we're very confident. So you're getting monthly metrics from us now, and what you'll see is that the numbers are staying pretty static, and January is going to be no different. But the difference between the numbers is that some of the older ones are falling off, and we have more in the 0 to 30 category, which is good news. From a management standpoint, what I'm really looking at is the metrics that are 150 days or older. older. So I'm looking to see how many of those are moving or how many of those are sitting in procurement's court. And I can tell you for January's metrics, 14 are with the vendor for signature, 9 are in internal review, and 6 are still in evaluation. But what that tells me is there's no action on procurement's part. There is action on our part to follow through to make sure these things are done, but I want to make sure that they're not sitting in our queue, they're actually out with the business or out with a vendor for signature, that sort of thing. So I'm really looking at the metrics in that particular area. In addition, I'm looking at the metrics on pending procurements age by type. So how many of the amendments and how many of the solicitations are we not getting done within the required timeframes or the recommended timeframes? And so you'll notice in January, the report's going to show 32 amendments that still are past the 60-day mark, which is concerning. But what I can say is only 4 of them haven't been started. So again, those are the things that I'm looking at to move through our backlog is where are things stuck? And from a management perspective, those are the things I'm targeting. So we're getting together and we're assigning those kinds of items that have been out there for a long time to people to get those things done. So what I'm hoping to do is to move towards not only getting through the backlog of older items, but really start moving the things through that we get in the 0 to 30 days on a more fluid basis. So we're going to have folks working on the old things and then folks working on the things that are coming through the door. So we can really start getting on that cycle to normalization, which I hope to see in July. So in July, what I'd like to see is that our amendments are getting done in 60 days. And when a shopping cart comes through within a week, we're assigning it to someone and that person has contacted the business area and we have a timeline already going as to how long this thing is going to take. Again, solicitations can take more than 6 months. As you know, the pension solution RFP is going to take more than a year. And so it just kind of depends on how many steps we have in there. If there's site visits or there's demonstrations or any of those things, it could take longer. So I'm never going to expect to see my list not have a 240 plus because we do have very complex procurements here. But again, from a management perspective, we're on it. We're looking at things on a regular basis. I'm looking at things daily, and we're assigning work as we need to assign it to get things done. So that's one of the reasons I'm pretty optimistic. And then secondly is we're learning how the system processes our data. So the system is working fine. The problem is it's the way we're putting in our data. And so we're finding that we're spending a lot of our time through problem resolution rather than doing activity and production. And we want to flip-flop that, right? So we're meeting as a group we're meeting as a group daily to go through those, what we're calling problem children. And so what we're finding is the issues could be avoidable up front. So it's the shopping cart submission. So it's the way the funding was put in, or it's the unit of measure that was put in that's causing problems on the backside of receipting. So we're getting smart. So that's what I'm really excited about is we're learning and we're getting smart. And so what we're going to do from a procurement standpoint is we're going to be looking at shopping carts that come in the front door. And before they even get worked, we're going to see if there's problems and then reject them. So they'll go back to the business areas, we'll explain what needs to be fixed, and at the same time, we're training our end users on the right way to submit shopping carts. So that's one of the other reasons why I think that we're making really good progress. And then finally is training. So today was our first procurement basics class. It's kind of it's the second class to the shopping cart training that we provided, and it's received very great feedback. So again, we're finally getting the BD training going where people are understanding we've gotten smarter, so now we're sharing it with the business areas, so that way when they put in their requests, the requests come through right the first time. So we do have some challenges that are coming up, so I don't want to pretend like it's all rosy. Year end is approaching again, so at year end we always get slammed with requests of people that are wanting to encumber money for this fiscal year. So we're gearing up for that. And in addition, we've got a whole list of, thanks to Chris Coyote, of business renew associated RFOs and RFPs and amendments that will be in conjunction with the pension solution. And so, of course, those are priorities, and so we're going to have to work those in as well. So what we're going to do is work overtime. We're going to have to work overtime in the next few months to really target those priorities and those things that we need to get through, because I would like to get our backlog caught up by April 15th. April 15th, all the year-end hits. We get through our year-end backlog, and then by July 1, we're ready to move forward in a very efficient manner. So with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
All right, any questions? Sharon?
So I wanted to ask, so you were saying with the issue with the end users and the data being put into the shopping cart?
Yes.
So the training that you just described, that's with end users? That's not with middle management or folks overseeing them, but that's with people that are actually doing the input of the data?
Right. So in each business area, there's requisitioners, and those requisitioners are tasked with actually putting in their request through the system. And in that request, there's account assignment information, which talks about the fund. It talks about the product category and how that relates to the general ledger. Those are the things that we want to get put in right in the very beginning, because in the end, it causes us problems on the financial statements.
yeah.
So we want to make sure things are falling right. So, but what we're finding is that's where it starts. So we really want the process to start right in the beginning. So yeah, they're coming to the training. Managers are coming to the training too, because they're approving the shopping carts. So if they're approving the shopping carts, they can be looking for those same kinds of items, which I think is great. So that by the time it gets to procurement, we've got it in there correctly. But then procurement will be kind of the last ditch effort to catch any problems before they get processed.
So if you were to identify kind of, as you kind of have analyzed this, and you're doing a great job, I'm very pleased with kind of the progress we're making to unstick what's been stuck. But if you were able to identify kind of what has been sort of the greatest issue, would you say it's that the input of data hasn't been accurate, or how would you qualify that?
Well, I think I would say that there's been challenges around the account assignment information. So as far as what fund to use, what product category to use, and again, we need to train our staff, and that's what the training is all about. So that's been part of it. Part of it too is the way that we enter the information as far as quantity and unit of measure, those kinds of things. So like for instance, if you're going to have a $17,000 bill from a vendor and you put it in at $17,000, you can only receipt that one, which means you have to receipt the whole entire invoice. But if you know that they were going to split that invoice up and charge you $8,500 twice, you would want to flip that and put it $17,000 at $1, so you can receipt into that amount more than once. So that's an example.
Yeah,
So
I just
it's.
got confused while you were talking about
I'm
it.
sorry.
I was like, if I had to input that data, I would.
Yeah. So,
So,
you know,
okay, got it. So it's like almost like learning. From my understanding, it's kind of learning a new language or learning it's a different culture of
Really is. And
ways
you
of
really
inputting
have to, when
data.
you're putting through the shopping cart, you really have to think about how that vendor's going to be invoicing you, how they're going to be billing you. Are you going to pay monthly? Are you going to pay, lump sum? Are you going to pay in small increments? So we're learning a lot about those nuances. And so we're smart enough, we can ask those questions. So as we get shopping carts through, we can look at it and go, I wonder if they really meant to do that. And then we can go back to them. And then, of course, the more we do that, the more they learn and the more the process can go through smoothly. And I think Robin's going to talk about accounts payable.
Yeah, so as you see in the numbers in accounts payable, we are having success in bringing the focus down to 0 to 30 days. We do still have a tail, that I call it, in terms of things that should have gone to the controllers for payments based on the Payment Act. I mean, really, in this area, it's fairly easy to say what the objectives are. You want to see everything in 0 to 30. I mean, that's where it should be, and exactly at 30 before we pay. That's how we manage the cash in the most effective way. We have 45 days to pay, and we want to pay on the 45th day, and the SEO requires 2 weeks to process. So we want to have it in-house at 30 days. And so what we've been successful at doing, and I think that's what we're translating on the procurement side, is making sure that we deal with that inbound data in a way that lets us process by the 30th day. And as Lisa alludes to, part of what the system is doing is enforcing internal controls that weren't enforced before. So what happens is that if we get an invoice that doesn't have a service receipt, we need a service receipt before we can pay, because that's the acknowledgement that we got the calendar refill. That's the simple example. Or that Investments has validated that the external manager's calculation of the performance fees due is accurate. So that's the other extreme, right? So we've got to have that acknowledgement before we can make the payment. And if we don't have that, then we need to dispute the invoice. And so what's happening now that we're focusing on that front end is that it is making that internal control work as it's supposed to work. It's strengthening the relationship we have with our vendors so that we know how we're managing the work with the vendor. And we're beginning to see that even at that point, we can get things corrected in time. So we are getting cooperation with the business areas. I had a conversation last night where we got invoices back, and the business area had said to dispute it, and we said, really, it looked like a legitimate invoice, but it turned out the vendor hadn't performed the service yet. So we shouldn't have paid it. So that was good. That was good, and that's how it's supposed to work. So again, in the numbers in January, which you don't have before you, these actually have gotten better. So that turnover rate is better. There's still, as Lisa alluded to, some trailing problems. We are trying wherever we can to get the vendor out of that problem and make a payment based on the assurance from multiple parties that the work has been done using functionality that we have to actually remit. But we still need to go back into the system and document the fact that we not only had the legal authority to buy, but we acknowledged the service and that we, in fact, made the payment and can get reimbursed. So again, confidence is building.
Ready. Harry?
I just had a question about the training. You'd mentioned that it's improving. Are you getting feedback anecdotally from employees, or do you actually survey the employees as to how the training is improving?
Yeah, we do a survey. We ask for a survey after every training class, so we're getting the information that way. And then I, of course, sit in most of those trainings in case there's questions above and beyond whatever the deliverer of the training can provide. And I'm asking people as they're walking out, how was that training? Did you learn something? Did it answer some questions for you and, solve some problems for you? So yeah, it's definitely getting some good feedback.
All right, anyone else? Seeing none. Lisa, Robin, thank you very much. Business Renew Oversight, Graham? Chris?
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So I'm here to present Grant Thornton's regular oversight report on the Business Renew projects, Business Direct, Pension Solution, and Data Prep. Do we have the clicker? And we're going to start with Pension Solution this time. Before we get into the status update on the project, I wanted to talk a little bit about the role of oversight and our reporting to you during the Pension Solution project over the course of the rest of this calendar year. Because, as you're all aware, the Pension Solution RFP has been released, and therefore we're now in an active procurement. So I want to talk a little bit about what that means, and a little bit of maybe ask you what the board is really looking for in terms of information over the course of the year, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So now that we're in an active procurement, procurement confidentiality rules limit the kind of information that we can share with you in a public forum about what is actually happening on the project beyond the information that is, publicly released. So I want to talk a little bit about what that means in practice. But first of all, I want to talk about what we see as our role as oversight during the procurement process. As I think we've talked to you on prior occasions, the project team has put together a pretty detailed process for the execution of the procurement, as well as a detailed methodology for the evaluation of responses. And we think it's a pretty solid approach. If they execute, according to the strategy, it should produce a successful procurement. And so a big piece of our role over the course of this year will be monitoring the execution of that approach to make sure that the project team is actually executing against the strategy and achieving the outcomes that they originally intended. I don't know how many of you have actually been involved in any kind of large procurement, but it's a tremendously complicated thing, and the workload associated with it is extremely high. It's a very stressful environment to work in, and so part of our role, both at a tactical level in making sure that the actual process that's been agreed to is being executed, but also looking at a strategic level to make sure that what is actually being procured answers the business problem for which the pension solution was intended to address. During this process, we're obviously going to be working with the executive team and the project team at procurement to monitor issues and discuss issues as they arise. We will escalate issues and concerns to the board if it becomes necessary, but given, again, procurement confidentiality rules, that would only happen in the most severe of circumstances, and we don't anticipate that would be needed. So the question I have for the board is, what level of information do you feel you need during the execution of the procurement? Is communication of the publicly available information sufficient, or do you feel that you might need more than that? And I understand that Chris and Brian have talked a little bit about potential alternatives in that respect, because I guess I posed that question to the board as a starting point. How much information do you think you need, either at board meetings or outside board meetings, over the course of this year?
Anyone? Nobody's weighing in, Graham, but, okay, Tom?
Well, in the abstract, it's very hard for us to tell you. I would think what the position I'd be in is, since you're monitoring this process, that at some point along the way, if you thought we should know something that's not public, you should tell us. And we'd be looking for you to give us guidance on that.
And I think what it comes down to, I think, is are there issues or events that you would want to be aware of before they became public information? And certainly that's something that we can take on as part of our role to, make an assessment of that, and then work with Chris and Brian on ways to, provide that information to you. But what we don't want to have happen is that you get surprised. Or something happens that you weren't expecting, and the only time you find out about it is when it becomes public.
Graham, could you give the board maybe some examples of what you're talking about? Because I think that's what.
Yeah, I don't want to be surprised either. I'd like
Yeah.
to do that too. Just so I can feel that same anxiety. But I did, no, seriously. I did want to also just insert again, I had to step out. I didn't know if you had it on one of the slide bullets, but again, you're still always meeting with the chair and the vice chair and doing an update always as well. I'm not sure everybody in the board may remember that, but you're doing a risk update for the board, for the chair and the vice chair regularly.
So I mean, I could make a hypothetical for you. Let's say at some point in the next few months, the project team realizes after final proposals are in that they simply don't have the resources to be able to evaluate them on the timeline that they originally planned, and the procurement's going to be delayed. And so maybe contract award won't be for 6 months later than originally planned. When would you like to learn about that? Is
As
it
soon as possible.
okay.
Depends on the contract.
What do you guys think?
Yeah.
I would agree.
Okay?
Any other examples?
We could go through.
No, here, Tom, did you want to follow up? Grant does have, so
Yeah.
Grant
Well,
might want to weigh in on it too. Tom, did you have anything else?
Well, I find this whole dialogue a little bit unfair. I mean, I'm relying on you to monitor this process and tell us what we need to know. And we want to know it as soon as it's important to know it. I'm not going to review the code. I'm not going to review bid specifications. I may have my own ideas about which vendors have done better or worse in other situations. But, so, yeah, I mean, as soon as you think we should know something, we should know it.
Okay. So I'll take the action then that as we're looking at, obviously we'll continue to do, the regular monthly update on the public facing information, but if there are either issues or developments that I feel the board should be aware of, work with Chris and Brian on finding a way that we can
One of the things,
provide
part
that
of it,
information to you.
what Jack mentioned too, when you do your briefings with the chair and vice chair, that would be a good opportunity because they would at that point say this is something we need to bring the whole board in, so we can work with Brian on how we can work out the mechanics of that.
Yeah, some of these issues potentially, because they're contractual issues, may have some attendant legal issues and legal risks that we may want to have in a detailed discussion in closed session about, what the follow-ups could be. Some potential contractual disputes. So that's kind of, when they keep mentioning my name, that's really what they're talking about, is whether or not there is some sort of legal advice, that a legal discussion that we need to have in closed session.
Party, Grant?
Thank you. I was just going to weigh in because nobody else was, that I agree with Tom. that we're relying on our independent project oversight consultant. And I would assume that we would be able to, you could have one-way communication with the board, but I think I'm comfortable if you're already talking to the chair and the vice chair to, filter, communications can come to us from the chair. And then the other thing I wondered too, I mean, certainly we want to stay out of, we can't be in an advisory role, but I think we would want to know, kind of key milestones and when there are finalists that you're considering, if there's a way that that could be shared.
Robin, go ahead.
That actually will come in your, your pending procurement reports, right? Because we do need to let you know that we're dialoguing with particular entities so that you don't have a conflict of interest. So we've got a regular reporting vehicle for that to occur.
So we need to stay on top of the do not contact lists and things like that.
Sorry, yeah, just interject, but.
All right. Okay.
So in terms of the actual status of the project, basically the procurement is on schedule. RFP was released in November. There have been multiple addenda released. Pre-proposal conference was held, as well as a series of vendor education sessions, which I think the vendors found valuable and we think shared some valuable information with them that will help them prepare their proposals. Draft proposals are due on Monday, after which a series of confidential discussions will occur with the various bidders. Training is underway to the evaluation team, and a number of other, I say, ancillary but supporting activities around organizational change management and the requirements management tool are underway as well. So generally, the procurement is on track. This time they're on schedule, and we feel that all the appropriate steps have been taken. Again, as I said, what we'll be doing during the whole process as this unfolds is monitoring both that they're, from a schedule perspective, that they're staying on process, but also from a content perspective, that they're executing the strategy as was originally agreed to, and that the, the outcomes that are being looked forward to are per what the strategy defined. So any other questions on pension?
No one's in line.
Let's talk about Business Direct. So the activities associated with completing Release 1 and Release 1.5, basically the initial project activities for Business Direct are almost complete. There are a few items that are outstanding. There's one financial report and what are called the supplier resource management reports, basically procurement reports. They're the only things that are outstanding. They're planned to be completed by the end of this month. It might slip into early March, but certainly by the next time the board gets together, all of these project activities should be complete. We talked a little bit about training just a moment ago. So the training has been ongoing. We've been getting anecdotal feedback from attendees of the training, and it's been uniformly positive. People seem to think that it's being effective. Training has started in January. There are more classes being held this month, and there are a series of training classes really scheduled out or planned out until May. And once that May timeframe hits, all of the supplementary training is planned to be complete. And at that point, there's a long-term training plan that's being put in place to basically take that training and create an ongoing sustainable training program for the organization. So over the next couple of months, we're obviously going to monitor the last few items in the closeout of Release 1 and Release 1.5, and also continue to see whether the training as it unfolds continues to meet the user's needs as they're identifying it. Any questions on Business Direct?
Anyone? Nope, we're good. Oh, hang on. Tom?
So, are we expecting proposals from? Which firms?
I don't think that's public information. No, it's not something we can share.
We have 8 firms that have indicated an intent to bid, but we're not announcing those, I guess, in public session. We can do that through private?
It's on the contact list, so.
Yeah.
And also, those intent to bids are, they're not mandatory, so somebody could have submitted an intent to bid but not actually submit a proposal, so we won't really know until the 10th to see what actual proposals come in.
Okay.
Harris?
just for clarification, on the board website, the no contact, that's where we would see that. So on the board website, there's a no contact area where we can get that information.
I'll send out a note.
I was just gonna say.
I think Mary sends it out also, a reminder. Marty, anyone else?
Well, it'd be
Go ahead,
helpful at some point, if you could give some assessment of the quality of the bidders. And I guess that would be in a private session, but I think that would be helpful background for us, probably more so.
I'd be happy to share any sort of factual information about prior performance and general information about the bidders themselves.
Yeah.
So how does that work with the timeline that we're on?
Anytime after Tuesday of next week.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll know.
So the
who
next time,
It'd be
well, so
April.
I'm trying to think about logistics. If we don't meet in April, does it do us any good because we've already hired?
No, because final proposal's on June till April.
Okay.
So the actual evaluation process will stretch on through the summer.
Okay, thank you. Marty, anything else, Tom? Any other questions? All right.
Okay. Data preparation project. Data prep is currently running behind schedule. The project hit some issues as they moved into some of the more complex analysis. They have taken some corrective actions which we think will actually bring them back on track. And so we're hoping, we downgraded them to yellow from green in the last report. We're hoping to be able to upgrade them again to green in the next one if the actions that they've taken prove to be effective. Part of the problem was they had some quality issues, which was causing some rework. They've changed out some of the staffing and the approach, which we think is going to help. At this point, we think it's fairly likely that they are going to hit their target of August to have the analysis report complete. So the challenge then is once the analysis report has been submitted, what to do with all of the recommendations. Some of them are going to be administrative, operational things that CalSTRS can handle on its own. The challenge will become if some of the recommendations require either policy or even legislative changes in order to be effective. And that's where the timeline becomes interesting because there could be a dependency then on the pension solution project because it can take a long time to make those things happen. I know the Business Renew Program Management Office is planning to track those as separate items so they can see what those dependencies are, and we can have a clear view whether, in effect, there are going to have to be decisions made on some policy and legislative items that if they're not made on time, they could actually impact the pension solution schedule.
All right. Any questions? Oh, Elena?
Can you say a little more about what quality issues are?
Basically, the process by which the team is doing the work is they're writing a series of database queries to pull data out of the existing systems and then running a set of analysis. They were having some problems with the queries in terms of getting the right kind of data and then getting through the analysis fast enough, and they were finding some basically errors in the information that was coming back, so they had to go back and redo it. There was a quality control issue within the team, and so what they've done is changed out some of the people as well as changed some of their processes to try and make sure those errors don't occur and they get it right first time. And that's sort of the corrective actions that they're putting in place right now.
And then in terms of getting it back on track, is the thinking that it can be, the corrective action can get it back on track so as to not extend the time frame or result in increased cost pressure?
Exactly. So the intent, their target is basically by the end of this month, they'll be back on schedule, and then to stick with that schedule through August when they'll be complete.
Okay. And then just the policy and legislative issues, can you say more about what you mean specifically by that?
Well, I'm probably not the best person to give a specific example. I don't know if
Peggy to do that because we were just talking about that. And to the extent they do involve the board, those would become part of your board work plan when you set it up for the coming year. So you kind of give a calendar. This is one of the, even though it's lesser in size than the other things, the other parts of the project, this is one of the biggest drivers of success ultimately for our project. So we're all watching this. Peggy?
There's tough decisions ahead.
So there are issues that we want to make sure that we deal with the objective of being able to understand what it will take to convert the data that we need into the new system. So that's the focus of the data preparation project. And I'm the executive sponsor for that project. That's why I'm up here speaking about it. And so there may be, what we're expecting in August from the vendor who's helping us look at our data preparation is a series of recommendations on issues that we could address in order to make sure that the data is ready for conversion. It's not the fix criteria. That's something that we would be assessing, but it would be paths that we could take in order to understand what we have to do in order to make sure that all of our data is ready. And like any system that has millions and millions and millions of data elements, some of them are not correct or are missing or have been, are confused. And so we want to make sure, I mean, when we created the START system, for example, not every single field has a distinct usage. So sometimes we use the same field on the data screen for two different purposes. And there's two different sets of data in that screen. So how do we deal with that? We've incorporated different rounding amounts into the methodology for the benefits calculations. We know that's a problem. Some of them use a two-digit decimal placement. Some of them use a 3. Some of them use a 4. Some of them show 4 on the screen, but the system uses a 7. Some of them use infinity as the decimal placement. We need one rounding convention. How are we going to deal with that? And how does that data convert for us? And what do we do with that at the time of conversion? So there are many issues that we know we're going to have to deal with. We have a list of inconsistent business practices where we've done things differently in different parts of the organization. That's all being looked at. That's part of the task of the data preparation team. Their result or their deliverable is a set of recommendations for us. Those recommendations may then be used by executive staff to review and see clearly where is there opportunity for legislation that gives us the kind of authority and responsibility that we need. That's one outcome. A second outcome would be where are there changes in business practices and policies that we can implement given our existing authority. That's another one. There could be recommendations for regulatory authority that help us explain the law because the law is complicated and in some cases inconsistent. And so how do we maneuver through that environment? And there may be other policy level concerns that would really require the board to help us shape a path forward regarding. Not all of these are solutions that we would have to put in place necessarily before conversion. We just have to know what our long-term strategy is going to be so that we can build the path to fix it after conversion or make a decision that we won't fix some things, or we won't adjust some things simply because there isn't a better way for us to get better information. So there's a range, and I don't know yet the extent to which board involvement in that range will be required. But I think it's fair to say that there will be board visibility of the types of changes or the types of policies that we're going to be making. And certainly you have a role in any regulatory or legislative activity or any major policy that would affect how members perceive their benefits and how members receive their benefits. Does that make sense?
Ready? Thank you, Peggy. Anyone else? Back to you, gentlemen.
I think that's it.
Think that's it? All righty, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before we go to calendar, it's 3:30. We probably only have 15, 20 minutes, max a half an hour. We have dinner scheduled at 6. So I am going to recommend that we skip dinner and have what we're gonna have for dinner for lunch tomorrow, and we can all go home instead of staying till 6. What do you guys think? Terry? Thumbs up? Tom?
Sure.
Sounds good.
Good?
Well, we'll cook it fresh tomorrow. I don't want you to think we're cooking in time.
Hey, I have leftovers at home. Alrighty, so Jack, if you want to key up calendar, I'll let Mary know so she can let the cafe know.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we're also busy. We like to get the first dates out here as soon as we can for the coming fiscal year. And if this is satisfactory now, you could adopt it, or we put it out here and everybody goes back and checks their calendar and comes back if there's any conflicts. But just for everyone to remember, when Mary kind of follows the pattern we have followed before, which is we generally look at 3 days that work toward the end of the week, but we're also trying to navigate 3 other things. So it isn't just a blind calendar. We look at the CalPERS dates, since we have 2 board members shared with the other system. We look at particularly high-profile conferences like CII that a number of you attend, and then we do our best to honor the various growing number of religious holidays with the growing number of religions that we look at. So, it's a complicated matrix. So these are the dates that are falling in place. And again, we have a number of about 4 months where they're just held in case something happens, but usually you don't need them. The only date I hope works, because we needed to move ahead on actually getting a hotel for you, is that October offsite date. That's the one that is real important to kind of keep where it is if we can, because it turned out to be busier than we thought at the Irvine area where we're going to be we're going to be opening up the new office in June, and so we would be able to meet there and also have a hotel right near the Irvine office, right by the airport. Anyway, you don't have to do this verbally, but if there's big issues, maybe you could just send me a note and I'll digest that with Dana to see what works best. But those are the things that Mary is trying to balance here and getting it set up for you. And Joy, maybe I'll do this just while we're here together, because I'm not sure we had this pattern as clear before, but we tried to make the July meeting the meeting where it has a different format than this one, where we really work up the annual activities with an annual agenda for each committee and really try and think through what every committee wants to accomplish during that next 12 months and actually program it by month. And it's worked pretty well. Frankly, I would have to say those work plans hold up about 90% of the way every year. We've been doing this now for a number of years. So it really shows a nice accountability structure for the board, for every committee laying out at that July meeting. So in June, we actually will usually ask each committee to really, what are the things you're thinking about? What are your priorities for the year for each of the committees? And then July, propose a structured set of activities by month for each committee. And then on the staff side, as Cassandra was talking about earlier, we'll provide you with an actual business plan of staff activities for the year, so you can kind of see the initiatives. Although you can kind of even get a sense from today, the project we just went through is taking up about 80% of the breathing air in the building. So, there isn't only 20% left to work on something else probably. But that's a really good meeting, the July one, to get everyone's focus on what we're doing.
Tom?
Random, but at the end of next year, you're holding a series of meetings Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday instead of Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. June.
And which month are you on, Tom? I just saw
June.
June. June of 15?
Yeah. I mean, it's embarrassing to say, but Mondays are always bad for me, so that I know
Okay.
that's a problem.
There was probably a reason. I don't know what guided it, but we'll go back on that one and check.
It's also it could be Memorial Day.
Oh, I hope not.
Memorial Day weekend, yeah.
I think it's the week before.
Yeah, okay.
But we got you on the Monday issues are a little tough. Yeah, and also that means sometimes using part of a weekend to fly in on. But so that I'll flag that June 1st. Anything else that jump out at you right now, like, oh my gosh, this would never work?
I have the same thing with Tom, though. I like the Wednesday through Fridays better than Monday through Wednesday.
Okay. Got it.
All right.
Okay, then why does everybody just go back and check, maybe do a final run through and just send us a note then? Okay, thank you. And we're going to look at what's next, the agenda. Let me look here, where are you?
We have the consent agenda.
Oh, your consent agenda, yeah.
We have the committee reports in front of us. There is an action item from audits and risk management. All others could be accepted as written. Are you ready, Paul, by any chance?
Yes.
You want to click in and,
Yeah.
there you
I just
go.
need to read the.
Yeah, just that to be read, yeah.
Okay. By the direction of the committee, I move adoption of the revisions to the Audits and Risk Management Committee Charter as approved by the committee.
So that's a recommendation coming from the committee. It doesn't need a second. Is there any discussion? That was given to us earlier when we had the discussion with Cassandra. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Already, we've approved that. So you have the new board member education sheet in front of you. I'd entertain a motion to adopt the rest of the consent agenda. It's been moved by Harry, seconded by Grant. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? You ready? Okay.
It's on the calendar issue.
Okay, go ahead.
CTA, State Council Retirement Committee. I just ask that CalSTRS, when you do your off-site, to be mindful of the location of your hotel and the cost of your hotel, because members of the public who do want to come, sometimes the times that you choose, we aren't able to stay at the same hotel, or the hotels in the region are extremely expensive. So just when at all possible, just take into consideration that, or give us a heads up in advance time so that we can make a reservation early enough that it's not going to be extremely expensive.
Yeah, we'll do that right now with you, actually, because we're having trouble ourselves, quite frankly. You. I'm amazed how full some of these places are. Yeah. Yeah, I'll have Mary tell you right now what she's thinking about. Yeah.
All right. I guess we did 14 along when we did 13 with the committee reports, because that was appeals and investments, and we put those all together. I don't recall any items referred for board decision from any of the committees. New business or review of information requests. Jennifer, I don't think we had any information requests, did we?
Just have the one that I think you're going to end up doing in closed session, the assessment of the current bidders.
Yes. Okay. Draft agenda. Jack, do you want to talk about the draft agenda then?
Glad to. And we can struck the draft agenda really by going back to the work plan, Joy, and I just really pull all those work plan items on a draft for all these committees. That's why it works so well to have the work plans handy. So we just scrape those items and put them right in the draft agenda. But I'm going to walk through this one just so everyone kind of sees what the flow of that is. This is the annual meeting when the board elects its officers for the coming year. And just a reminder, the officers who are elected at that meeting take office at that moment. So we start out the meeting with that. We'll adopt the calendar with any changes like the ones you just talked about here. People are asked to, at that time, fill out a volunteer sheet for what committees they'd like to be on, but those committees really don't take effect until July, but it gives the chair a chance to sort everything out and see if there's balance on all the committees. So he or she can do that. And then really, as you can see, the theme of this meeting will be entirely having your actuarial hat on. So we'll be visiting for hours with you on all the various valuations, but it is different this time because in addition to your normal valuations, as you can see in items A through D, for the first time ever, you're going to be looking at assumptions that will be based on our calculations for GASB. So that'll be a new experience for us to take a look at those on item 5E. We now do, for some years now, Ian Lanoff does an annual fiduciary training, and we try to make that new and spicy every year, but it still has its normal foundation to it. So Ian will be doing that for about an hour during the meeting, and I think, I'm just flipping down, I think that's the heart of what we're doing that month. Yeah. Yeah, so it's a pretty full meeting, and then we'll come back, of course, back on the credible comp, as we talked about earlier. Yep, that's it.
All right. Thank you.
Of course.
Brian, one of the things we did miss in closed session was the litigation report. Would you like to go back into closed session? Do you have any updates on any of the?
I don't think I do. There is an item of clarification. I don't think I do, but there is an item of clarification on the report that was provided, closed session report on benefits cases. And I think there's additional information that I can send to you as in an email as an attorney-client
We can go in a
privilege.
closed session really quickly if you just want to take care of it now.
Unfortunately, I don't believe that or benefits
Persons here.
so.
Okay.
If you don't mind, I'll send you, there was one case on there that there was not a discussion, I believe, on what the subject matter of the case is.
Okay,
I think that's the only thing that's not on paper.
alrighty.
So just on the actuarial evaluations that we'll be doing, so these will be refreshing all the numbers we're using for our various communications around the funding strategy. If any board member just needs a refresher on actuarial issues to kind of get you ahead for reading these, just send a note to myself or Ed, and we can arrange a mini training session at a phone at your office with Nick and Rick, just to help you understand the reports better. I want to make sure those are real comfortable for you.
Alrighty. Alrighty, is there anything else good for the order? Seeing no one chiming in, we're adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very good discussion.